Hello primary 5 superheroes, welcome back. This is seif. Today we're gonna be talking about a new topic, includes new challenges and new games. So let's get started. Our new concept going to be changes in the food web. In the previous episode we studied the food chain and the food web. In today's topic we're gonna be studying changes in food web. Mainly we have three main changes and the effect of each one of them. The first one going to be the climate changes. What are the climate changes and what is the effect of the climate changes in the food web? The second one is the pollution. What is the effect of the pollution on the food web? Finally, the human activities. And what is the effect of the human activities in the food web? Mainly within studying each one of them, we need to answer two main questions. Question number one, what is the effect of each one of them on the population of the animals in the food web in different ecosystems? During the lesson, we're going to be studying the effect of each one of them on the population. But first of all, what does it mean population? I guess you might be thinking about the population as number of living organisms or number of animals in a food web. So the word population means the number of living organisms in an area. This area could be a part of the ecosystem or the ecosystem at all. So the word population refers to how many living organisms in an area. The number of living organisms in the ecosystem at all. This ecosystem could be marine ecosystem as you see there, or a desert ecosystem, or a forest ecosystem, even in a wetland. So let's get started in the first one, which is going to be the climate change. Right now we're going to be studying the effect of the climate change on different food webs in different ecosystems. Here is the first one. I guess you can determine right now which ecosystem is that. Perfect. It's the desert ecosystem. Here the ecosystem is characterized by the following features or the following characteristics. Number one, the desert is a sunny place, has high temperature, less water, but it has some animals. They can adapt within these conditions, but here are some changes might affect the desert ecosystem. For example, what's gonna happen if the water level here increases? For example, extra rain. What's gonna happen? Just think about it. The second question, what's gonna happen if the amount of water which is stored underground here disappeared at all, and this ecosystem turns into a system without water at all, without any water drop. The following question, I guess we have feeding relationship between all of these animals. So some of them are predators, some of them are prey. They feed on each other, as we studied previously in the food chain and the food web. But what if one of these living organisms increased in the number? What happens when the population is changing? So the number of each living organism might be increasing or decreasing according to these changes. So does this affect the ecosystem? Is it positive effect or negative effect? Is it good or bad for these animals? Just think about it. Stop the video, try to think about the answers, and let's keep going. To make sure about your answers, let's take a look together. We know that we have gentle rain in the desert and that happens normally. So what's normal in the desert is the gentle rain. Few amount of water droplets from time to time appears in the desert or fall down in the desert according to the climate that is present there. So the gentle rain has an effect on the desert ecosystem which affects the food web. How does this take place? Let's take a look. The animals that live in desert here adapted to the gentle rain, which means the gentle rain has a positive effect on the desert ecosystem. So the question, what happens if we have gentle rain in the desert? That's something good. The animals there adapted to it. So the question here going to be, what happens if we have gentle rain in the desert? I guess the answer supposed to be the desert ecosystem may be improved. So the question here, what happens if there is gentle rain in the desert? And the answer, it may be improved. Improved means getting better. That's something good in the desert. The reason here is something special. It makes sense. Gentle rain, which is suitable for the plants that live there, so the plants stay alive, the animals feed on plants, stay alive, and finally, the system at all improve? The reason here makes sense because in the desert there are plants are adapted with gentle amount of rain, gentle amount of water, or few amount of water, which means these plants can stay alive and grow up in these conditions. So the plants can grow up, the other animals feed on plant like primary consumer can stay alive, and then the rest of the food web. The following one here going to be the change in the climate. That what happens normally. So what happens if we change the climate in the desert ecosystem? For example, what happens if there is heavy rain in the desert? The word heavy refers to much amount of water, extra amount of water. What happens if we have large amount of water falling in the desert ecosystem? Just think about it. If we have extra amount of water here, this is not gonna be healthy or suitable for the plants that live there. So the ecosystem here might be destroyed. Why? Because the heavy rain causes floods, and floods might make all plants there die. So what happens in the food web if all plants died? If there is no plants in any foodie chain or any food web? I guess the primary consumers will not find something to eat, and then they die. What happens to the secondary consumers? They will not find primary consumers to eat, then they die. And finally, the food web at all will be destroyed because of just one change. So if the climate has been changed in one of the ecosystem is destroyed according to changing in just one condition there. Let's study the effect of the climate change but in a different ecosystem to make sure it has the same effect in every ecosystem. Here in front of you a grassland. The grassland or the forests are characterized by the following. First of all, they have cool air. Second of all, they have moistened soil because of the rain. So what happens here in this ecosystem if the rain stopped? The amount of rain that makes the soil moistened decreased or stopped at all. What's gonna happen here in this ecosystem? Stop the video, think about the answer, and then play a video again to make sure is it correct answer or not quite right. If your answer was drought, your answer is totally correct. What happens when the water amount decreases in a place? If the rain stopped, the soil will be exposed to drought. The word drought means there is no water, the soil will be completely without water. Then the plants that live here die. Then the primary consumers will not find something to eat. Then the animals might die if they stayed here in the same place, or they might migrate. The word migrate means they're gonna travel to a different area, has suitable conditions. So the effect of changing one of the factors of the climate which causes drought might destroy the ecosystem at all. This ecosystem needs water. When we change the conditions here, the ecosystem might be destroyed. So here the question again, what happens if we have drought in an ecosystem such as the forest or another ecosystem? The answer going to be the food web in the ecosystem may be destroyed because the drought there negatively affect the food web in the ecosystem. From the consequences of a changing climate, that it could be good for some animals and bad for the other animals. That might affect their population. The number of these animals might increase due to that. Let's take an example. Here we have a question. What happens when there are many top predators, or the number of the top predators in a food web increased? Is it something good for the food web or bad for the animals of the food web? Let's think about it together. You can see here one of the top predators is hunting one of the animals that consider the primary consumer there. If we have extra amount of the top predators there, what happens to this kind of living organisms? If we have many lions, many tigers, many top predators, and all of them are hunting this zebra, what happens? Just think about it. You're gonna notice here if we have many top predators, that might affect the food web negatively. How? If the number of the top predators increases, the other organisms in the food web may be harmed. The word harmed here refers to decreasing their number. So if the number of the top predators increase, the number of the prey decrease because the top predators feed on these prey. So by increasing the number of the top predators, the other living organisms in the same food web may be harmed. The last piece of information about the climate change going to be the wildfires. We have to answer here some questions. First of all, do you think the wildfires good or bad? Do you think they are positively affecting the ecosystem and the food web, or negatively affecting the food web and the ecosystem? What do you think? I guess the answer is clear. It's totally dangerous, it's totally harmful for the animals of the food web. It destroys the food web and the ecosystem at all, because the wildfires produce large amounts of smog and ashes. Both are negatively affect the lungs and the respiratory system of the animals live there. Besides, it destroys their home. The wildfire destroys the ecosystem, as you see. So that's actually negative effect of the climate change in ecosystems. And now it's the time to study the effect of the climate change on a different ecosystem, which is the mountains or the cliffs where the seabirds live. As you see there in front of you on the screen, there are kinds of birds live at the top of the mountains or near to the watery places or the wetlands. And they feed on the fish that live in water here. Is the climate change useful for them or harmful for them? Let's think about the answer together. Stop the video, try to think what's gonna happen if the climate change by increasing or decreasing the temperature, by changing the conditions in this area, and then play the video to reveal the answers. Here is the answer. As you see here are the seabirds. Where do they live actually? Near to the sea. They like to build their nests, their home, near to the sea at the top of the mountains or the cliffs. And they feed on the fish that live here in water. But have you ever asked yourself what's gonna happen if the fish that live here disappeared? What happens to these kinds of birds? Are they going to stay and die or migrate into a different place? The second answer is the correct one. The seabirds that live at the top of the mountains or the cliffs here are waiting to see fish in this area because that's their favorite kind of food. So they can hunt fish and eat and stay alive. But the conditions that are happening due to the climate change might make the fish here disappear. When the fish disappear, the seabirds might die or travel to a different place. They migrate into a different place. But why exactly the fish migrate? Let's discover the answer together. The fish in this area are feeding on the zooplankton. These are microorganisms in this area, represent a food for some fish. So the small fish are feeding on the microorganisms like the zooplankton or the microscopic organisms. These organisms are highly sensitive to the temperature changing. These microscopic living organisms are really sensitive to the change in temperature. These microscopic living organisms are found in the cold water, so they stay alive in the cold water. Rising the temperature or the change in the temperature by increasing the temperature actually kills them. So when they die, the fish will find nothing to eat. So the fish migrate into a different place. When the fish migrate into a different place, this kind of birds will find nothing to eat. So the change in the temperature are negatively affecting every ecosystem. It's negatively affecting animals in desert. It's negatively affecting the grassland or the forests. And finally, it's negatively affecting the seabirds at the top of mountains and cliffs. It seems like all ecosystems are negatively affected by change in the temperature. So it seems like change in the climate or the temperature might negatively affect all ecosystems, not just one. So we have finished the climate change successfully. Now it's the time for the second factor, which is the pollution. And what is the negative effect of the pollution on the ecosystem, food web, and the population of the animals within the ecosystem? In front of you here, an example of the water pollution. Definitely we have many kinds of pollution, but the one that we need to study here is the water pollution. I guess from the image you can determine what does it mean, water pollution. But especially here we need to talk about the plastic products. because this is the most important thing to study here, the effect of the plastic pollution. So let's discover what is the negative effect of the plastic pollution. In front of you here, a sea turtle. The sea turtles are from the most important examples that are negatively affected by the plastic pollution. Why? Let's discover that from the food web or the food chain of the sea turtle. In front of you here, the food chain of the sea turtle. It lives in a place, has many living organisms, but actually the ecosystem that the sea turtle likes to live in is full of jellyfish. The sea turtle likes to eat the jellyfish. The sea turtles are feeding on jellyfish. That's the component of the food chain or the food web, which is going to be the favorite meal for the sea turtle. But the sea turtles there cannot differentiate actually between the jellyfish and the plastic products. So the plastic products, when they are moving in the water like that, so the sea turtles cannot differentiate actually between the plastic products or the jellyfish. They might feel like it's a jellyfish, so they go to hunt it. So when they go to hunt the plastic products as jellyfish, they struggle. They stuck in the plastic bags, the plastic bottles, the plastic products, so they cannot untie themselves. Or if they were eating these plastic products, so the plastic products stuck inside the digestive system of the sea turtles, they cannot digest the plastic inside their mouth, inside their esophagus, inside the digestive system. So the plastic pieces that they eat stuck inside the digestive system, not just in the mouth, so they cannot digest it, and it's really harmful and painful for them. The second living organism that might be negatively affected by the plastic pollution here is the coral reefs. Kindly keep in mind the coral reefs are really important in the marine food web, not just because it's a part of the food web, but because it provides many kinds of fish shelter and food. So the coral reef, not just a part of the food chain or the food web in the marine ecosystem, it's really important for the other fish because it protects them, so it's a shelter for them. So what is the negative effect of the plastic pollution on the coral reefs in the marine ecosystem? Let's discover. The negative effect occurs here due to the ultraviolet radiation. The abbreviation UV refers to ultraviolet radiation. Ultraviolet radiation. This is kind of harmful radiation is coming from the sun. That has negative effect because the ultraviolet radiation here changing the plastic into microplastic. So the ultraviolet radiation here breaks the plastic products into microplastics. Micro means very, very, very small. So the microplastics are very, very, very small pieces of plastics. These pieces of the microplastics are really harmful for the coral reefs. From the main functions of coral reefs within the food web, not just providing food, not just providing shelter, from the main functions of the presence of coral reefs in the food web, in the marine ecosystem, filter the water for the fish. And that's from the most important jobs or the functions of coral reefs in any food web or any food chain or any marine ecosystem. It filters the water, gives the fish shelter and food. So the presence of coral reefs are really useful in any food web and any marine ecosystem, not just for providing fish food and shelter. Also the coral reefs filters the water for them. But these microplastics are really harmful for coral reefs. So the microplastic pieces not just harmful for the sea turtles, it's really harmful for coral reefs as well. But what if the coral reefs are exposed to two factors together? Change in temperature and microplastic together. What's going to happen to coral reefs if they are negatively affected by changing in temperature and microplastic together? That actually causes coral bleaching. So that's the effect of a changing temperature with the pollution on the coral reefs. So the word bleaching here refers to the disappearance of colors and the death of coral reefs, and that might destroy any food chain or any food web because the coral reef is really important there. So let's understand more about the coral bleaching. Why the coral bleaching occurs, why these colors from the coral reefs disappear because of rising temperature and the pollution in water. Here are some examples about coral reefs. Actually, they are colorful because of presence of colorful algae, which provides the food for fish and gives the coral reefs its amazing shape. When the temperature of the water increases and it turns into very warm water, these algae disappear. These algae cannot stay alive in very hot temperature or in very warm water, so they disappear. This is why the coral bleaching occurs, and that has really negative effect on the food web. Let's discover what's gonna happen. This is a real example of a food web present in a marine ecosystem. You can see here the algae, which represents the producer of the food web in front of you, and we have here the clam, zooplankton, and the sea urchin. Every one of them represents a primary consumer. Then the starfish that feeds on clam becomes next as a secondary consumer. The coral represents a secondary consumer which feeds on zooplankton. The parrotfish represents a secondary consumer and it feeds on the sea urchin. Then the turn comes for the tertiary consumer, which is going to be here a butterfly fish or the triggerfish. Both represent here a tertiary consumer because the butterfly fish feeds on coral, which is a secondary consumer, which feeds on zooplankton as a primary consumer, and here is the producer. The second example here is the triggerfish, which feeds on the coral reef as a secondary consumer, which feeds on the zooplankton, which is a primary consumer. So the triggerfish is a tertiary consumer like the butterfly fish. Finally, the turn comes for the shark. The shark here represents the top predator. But besides that, the shark presents a tertiary consumer in the same time. How? Let's take a look here. The shark is the top predator because it feeds on the trigger and the butterfly fish together. But don't forget, the shark here feeds on the parrotfish as well, which is a secondary consumer. So the parrotfish represents a secondary consumer. It feeds on the sea urchin, which is a primary consumer, which feeds on a producer. So producer, primary consumer, secondary consumer. So the shark here represents a tertiary consumer when it feeds on the parrotfish, and it represents the top predator or the final predator when it feeds on the trigger and the butterfly fish together. Our question going to be, what happens if the coral reef disappeared? What happens to all living organisms here by the disappearance of the algae from here and from the coral reefs together? When coral bleaching takes place and the green algae with the colorful algae that are present here on the coral reefs disappear, that might negatively affect the food web at all because it provides food for butterfly fish, triggerfish, and also the parrotfish. So the coral reef here, not just a part of the food chain or not just a part of the food web, it provides many kinds of fish, food, and shelter. By the disappearance of the coral reefs from the food web will be totally destroyed. So that's the effect of rising the temperature on the coral reefs. It might be really harmful. So rising the temperature and the plastic pollution on the coral reefs are really harmful. What makes coral reefs disappear from the food web destroys the food web at all, which is known as habitat loss. Habitat loss means they're gonna lose their habitat. And now it's time for the third factor affecting the food web or the ecosystem, which is gonna be human activities. So let's try to answer this question. Marine organisms are negatively affected by the leakage of oil into the water. What do you think? Is the leakage of oil has a negative effect or positive effect for the marine life or the marine ecosystem? Definitely it has a negative effect, but this is not just the human activities example. We have more examples like the overfishing, like for example throwing plastics in water, and we studied previously what is the negative effect of throwing plastics in water, and now it's time to study overfishing. Overfishing means overhunting of fish, not just fish, it's the overhunting of all animals in any ecosystem. This is really harmful because animals need time to compensate the missing members. If we hunt some of the fish or some of the animals from any ecosystem, they take time until they reproduce and bring more babies to grow up and compensate the missing animals. But overfishing is really harmful because it doesn't give the ecosystem time to compensate the missing members. One of the really important examples in our curriculum going to be Palau Island. Palau Island was a place has ecosystem including many different food webs and food chains, and it was exposed before to the three main factors that we are studying today. This island was exposed to climate change, human activities, and the plastic pollution. But they really suffered from hard consequences because of these three factors. But they decided to set rules to protect their environment. The first rule here was controlling the human activities, avoiding throwing plastics in water. The second one here was preventing fishermen from overhunting in this island. So they controlled human activities, they stopped throwing wasted materials in water, and also they stopped the overhunting. That was their plan, to restore the balance in their ecosystem one more time, and they passed this exam successfully. The second solution that we can suggest is the habitat restoration. This is really important scientific concept in our curriculum, because the habitat restoration refers to the process of returning the habitat or the environment or this part of the ecosystem back naturally as it was before. We have applied this project successfully in many places of the world, especially the nursery. The nursery was a place in the ocean where the conditions that are suitable for coral reefs are sitting there. So the nursery refers to an area of the sea where the scientists take care of small coral reefs or young coral reefs until they grow up. When they grow up, they take them back to their original environment one more time, which means habitat restoration for the marine ecosystem there. The second concept that you have to care about here is the Coral Reef Rehabilitation Project. It's a project of take caring of coral reefs in some nurseries until they grow up, then take them back to the places that they have taken from them before to compensate the damage or to solve the mistake or to fix the problem that happens there before, which refers to habitat restoration, and it has been applied before in nursery. The third solution, which is really important, is the Zero Plastic Project. So the Zero Plastic Project refers to replacement, replacing the plastic products by healthy and safe materials for the animals in the ecosystem. For example, we can replace the plastic forks by wooden ones. Also, we can replace the plastic bags by cloth ones. Finally, we have a piece of advice from a friend here, which is the sea turtle. It says to you, be a friend to the sea, which means keep it clean and happy for yourself and for them. As we know, in every session we have a gift, and the gift that we have today for you is going to be who am I or what am I. In front of you here some riddles or clues. You have to solve them successfully. When you finish, send me back a screenshot or send me the answers in the comments. You're gonna be rewarded by a huge gift in the upcoming lessons. Let's get started. I like cool waters by coast. I am a predator. I am gray with white belly. So we are talking about an animal has dark back and white belly. And this animal is a predator. Besides, it lives in water. That's really important. I have 300 sharp teeth that are sharp like triangles. So what am I? You might be thinking about the shark. If your answer was shark, you did a great job. Solve the rest of these what am I cards and send me back the results in the comments and you're gonna be rewarded. Finally, don't forget to make like and subscribe to my YouTube channel if you didn't make it, and see you in the upcoming events. Goodbye.